This is the Guided Podcast, an interview with the fly fishing industry's top guides and brand ambassadors. On this podcast, we cover topics such as the guiding lifestyle, conservation, different fisheries globally, and gear and technology to improve your game. I'm your show host, Greg Keenan. Before we begin today's show, let's thank our sponsors. Scientific Anglers is the leader in producing the world's best fly lines for over 75 years. Scientific Anglers have set new industry standards with their SA Amplitude family of fly lines, both in technology and performance. See the difference for yourself today at scientificanglers.com. Show your show support and follow us on Instagram at Fly Fishing Insider Podcast. Now let's begin. This is Guided, and today we're speaking with Conway Bowman. Conway, welcome to the show.
What's up, Greg? How are you, man?
Good, buddy, good. I'm super glad you're here. I've got quite the background and quite the history as a fly fisher, a fly angler in the industry. Why don't you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I started fly fishing when I was, I think, 4 years old. Now, living in San Diego, this is not the fly fishing mecca, but I was fortunate enough that my father and I would spend our summers in Stanley, Idaho. So I learned how to fly fish on some of the greatest western rivers and streams when I was a kid. But every winter, my dad was a school teacher. We had to come back to San Diego. So I had to figure out how I was going to continue to fly fish here. I grew up conventional fishing as well, so that was a big part of my life here in San Diego. But I really started doing a lot of warm water fly fishing as a young kid, and bass, bluegill, things like that. Mm-hmm. And so flash forward about 10, 15 years, I got the sort of bug to start saltwater fly fishing. I got pumped up on Mako sharks, which I've been fishing Mako sharks probably, at least 25 years and guiding for them at least 20. So, but the Mako shark I figured out was the greatest adversary on the fly rod on the West Coast. Sight fish to it, they're big, and they jump, 15, 20 feet out of the water. There's no game fish in the salt water that jumps like a Mako shark, and they are a tremendous adversary. And I've been fortunate to have traveled the world, and I've caught marlin, I've caught billfish, tuna, all these great species on fly rods, and still the Mako shark, in my opinion, is the greatest. It is one fish that just gets my juices pumped up, and they're incredible. So that's kind of the nutshell of how it all kind of started for me.
Perfect. You know what, Conway, you talk about the Mako shark fishery, and what is it that, let's get a bit more in depth on that. Why are you so attracted to that fishery, just besides just the jumping and stuff? There must be some conservational aspects to it as well as the sport. Let's dive into that.
Yeah, so I think one of the reasons I got into it is because it was the only big game, saltwater game fish you could target on a fly on the West Coast and sight fish to it. So that was intriguing. You could either sight fish to a finning Mako on the surface, sort of tarpon style, or you chum them into the boat, which is the most productive way. And then you've got a fish that's anywhere from 40 to 300 pounds circling the boat and throwing out poppers at them. And they're grabbing them off the surface, and they're making these tremendously fast runs where you have to chase them down the boat. But as they're running away from the boat, they're jumping 20 feet out of the water. It's crazy. So it's a dynamic fishery. It's just right out my back door. I mean, I can walk out my front porch and I can look to the west, and within 2 miles, I'm looking at my sharking ground. So it's amazing. So logistically, for me, it's perfect. I can target these fish in a small boat. So I fish out of a bay boat, 24-foot bay boat.
Yeah.
Not a long run, but they're big, big, big game fish. So it was the convenience of the fishery. And then as I really got into it, I figured out as I got into it and I got to travel the world and try all these other fisheries, I kept coming back to San Diego going, this is really a special fishery because nothing rivals this anywhere in the world. There's no place you can go 2 miles off the beach and sight fish to a very, very large game fish and watch the take and the chunk. So that was it.
Absolutely.
So once I figured that out, I started guiding for them, got a captain's license, bought a boat, and at one time I was running 3 boats with 3 guides and all this stuff. And what I found through guiding and outfitting, targeting mako sharks, is that we weren't only providing a tremendous fishing experience for fly anglers, one that they would probably not get anywhere else in the world, but our strict catch and release policy really, helped spread the conservation word to each of these clients about how valuable sharks are in the ocean. So that was sort of a side thing that just happened. So we all really got dialed into being conservationists, shark conservationists, many years ago. And I'm talking 20 years ago. So all the guys here that were fishing mako sharks on the fly rod were also becoming great shark conservationists. And so we have really seen that pay off over the last 20 or so years. The National Marine Fisheries, they've banned longlining out here to protect, big pelagic species like mako sharks. And I think to some degree it had a lot to do with us getting that great catch and release message out to the public. And we still have clients that come in today that are just really, they're blown away that you can target these wonderful fish, get them to leader, and then release them, and then come back next year and get them when they're even bigger. So it's really a perfect place for all of that. Hooking a great game fish, watching the jump, releasing it, and then coming back in following years to catch that fish again, or whatever fish comes up, because we have big migrations of these mako sharks that come up from the south in the summertime.
It sounds awesome. I mean, I know I'm headed out there eventually to do that and to experience that fishery, and I can't wait personally. So,
you got to, man. It'll blow you away, and people are blown away. A lot of folks.
That's my question. How are the people reacting to this, and how? You pioneered this fishery, so how are the people reacting to it from where you started to where we are now?
So it's interesting. When I first started, it was so outside the box. People were like, So I was attracting 2 anglers. I was attracting blue water fly anglers and tarpon anglers. Okay, they wanted to target a big fish that jumped. So that got them stoked. So they would come out and they would experience, and they got it. They understood it, but they were like, "Holy moly, these are huge fish!" And they jump. I mean, tarpon are awesome. But a mako shark jumps 20 feet out of the water. Marlin are great, but makos eat marlin, and they jump. So we're targeting this giant fish. And so they got it, but it really ratcheted up their sort of their game in terms of blue water flying. And then I would get a lot of people that had never saltwater fly fished before. Mm-hmm. And because San Diego is a conference town, so we have a lot of conferences that come in from all over the world. So medical conferences, and a lot of folks that are in those conferences love to fly fish, and then they would hear about, hey, you can fly fish for mako sharks, and they were curious. They'd call me, we'd book a trip, we'd go out there, we'd set up, and all of a sudden, a 200-pound mako shark would show up to the boat. And these people that, by and large, only had caught trout in their life would see it, this huge mako, and they would go, what in the hell have I gotten myself into? And I would coach them through that moment. Okay, I would say, hey, you can do this. And they're like, I don't know if I can do it. I said, you can do it. So they would make the cast. They would hook the fish. They would watch that fish run and jump. We'd get it to leader. We'd release it. And then I would look at them and they'd go, oh, my God, that just completely blew me away. I had no idea you catch a fish that big on the fly. And a lot of those anglers that were only freshwater anglers many years ago that I fished with have become really, really proficient and really, really great saltwater fly anglers. So that is a huge compliment to the fishery and the fish.
Absolutely, for sure, 100%, man. I agree with that, and it's funny how I could see the conversion rate, just the smile on your face, watching those.
Oh, dude, the light switch just goes, it just turns on, and when you see somebody, I got to tell this story. I had a guy, he came in from Vermont, and I asked him. We were setting up, and we're sitting out there waiting for the first shark to come. I said, "What's the biggest fish you ever caught?" He goes, "Oh, it's 12-inch brook trout." I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah." I said, "Well, what got you out on my boat?" He goes, "I'm just curious about it." And the first fish and then he asked me, he goes, "Well, how big are these sharks really going to be?" I said, "Well, they could be anywhere from 40 pounds to 300. And he said, "Man, I hope a 300-pounder doesn't show up. I don't know if I can handle that." And within 20 minutes, a 300-pound mako showed up, and this guy looked at it and sat down and said, "I can't do this. I just can't." He was totally freaked out. And I said, "Well, it's okay, because maybe a smaller one will show up." So the big one kind of disappeared, and then a smaller one showed up. It was probably a 60-pounder. The guy hooked that fish. We got it to the boat. And I saw his confidence level go up. He's like, "Oh man, I totally did that. That was a huge fish." I said, "Yeah." And so at the end of the day, guess who showed up? That same 300 pounder showed up 8 hours later. And he looked at it and he goes, "You think I can do that?" I said, "Absolutely." Makes the cast, hooks the fish, we get it to the boat, and this guy, his life totally changed. And he became, after that moment, he became a really, really great saltwater fly angler. So, people, the Mako shark can change an angler's kind of, fly fishing life.
Mm-hmm.
You can go from catching a trout, and then all of a sudden you're hooked up to the biggest fish that jumps greater than any fish in the ocean. So it's cool to see that. It's cool to see that light switch go on. And every time it goes off for an angler, it goes off for me too. Or it goes on, I just go, wow.
And I think that would be like, I got to jump in here, but I think that would be like part of the addiction is watching that jump and watching that light switch go off going, oh my God, like once you get that high, you want it again. So for sure. So,
it totally is. Absolutely. Yeah. You can, when you sight fish that popper on the surface to a big Mako, you're watching the take, 15, 20, 30 feet in front of you. And it's like, holy smokes, this thing's actually chasing that fly down. And it's interesting because a lot of times people have a perception that a Mako shark will come up and grab it very viciously off the surface. But it's more like a trout, a brown trout, rising to a big caddis fly and sucking it off the surface. And then taking it down very slowly and then figuring out what's going on. It's like, and then they go, oh man, this is not right. And then they run. So it's a very slow motion. And then when they jump, they have incredible hang time. So they'll jump and they'll get 20 feet out of the air, but it's almost frozen in time because they flip head over tail 3 or 4 times and they land back in the water.
Crazy.
And people can see that if they go to my Instagram page, if they go to my Facebook page, they'll see these pictures of these sharks jumping, some videos. It's really spectacular. It really is.
Conway, let's talk about the technical aspects of it, like your lines and leaders and stuff like that you're using, like in the process of catching. You mentioned poppers, so walk us through how we would catch one of these.
So basically, I'm starting with I strictly use floating lines for Mako sharks, and I use an SA Sonic Titan. Awesome lines, been using them for a long time. And what I'll do is I'll cut those lines down pretty short. I'll cut them down to probably 50 feet. And then I'll basically back that with some monofilament, 60-pound monofilament. And then behind the monofilament, I'll run some 30-pound Dacron. And so the whole system is roughly, you got about 500 yards of line and backing on these reels. Mm-hmm. And I'm using these big Orvis Mirage reels, the Orvis 7 Mirage and the Orvis 6. And so from there, I use, fairly short rods, 8.5. 8.5 feet is the perfect rod. And then I'm going to a 5-foot piece of 30-pound tippet. I'm not a class tippet guy. I don't fish class tippet because I want to get these fish to the boat actually. So 30-pound tippet, and then from there I'm doing a 3.5-foot piece of 120-pound stainless steel leader. On each end, I have a haywire twist. On the leader end, I have a tuna ring or a barrel swivel, and then on the fly end, I attach that directly to a 10-aught hook, a 10-aught mustad hook. Now, I use tube flies too. So what I'll do is I'll take that tube fly, I'll slide it up the steel leader, I'll haywire twist in that big hook, and then there's my system right there. Tube flies have a foam head, they float very high on the surface, and what that does, it forces that Mako shark to come up and grab it off the surface. So the fly is not sinking below the surface, because that can be problematic.
That's what I was just going to ask.
When I first started fishing Makos, I would use sinking lines, and what I would do is you would sink the fly down. The Makos are pretty smart, and they would let that fly get into that lower water column, and then they would take it, and you couldn't really see the take. So what the popper did, it forces them to come up and commit to hitting the fly. And it's amazing how committed they get. When they see that thing on the surface and it's kind of, being pumped, popped around and moved, they'll come over and grab it. And Mako sharks eat seabirds, so seagulls, shearwaters. And I think they think these poppers are some sort of seabird on the surface. And so that's why they come up and they kind of grab them, not really aggressively, and then they chomp down and then they figure out something's wrong and then they take off. Mm-hmm. So that's the basic system. And then when I really bump it up for really, really big Makos, and we're bringing some Makos to the boat that are 500 pounds or bigger.
It's a big fish.
I'm using custom one-piece rods with fighting gimbals, and they're very, very. They're rigs that are very dialed into those very large fish.
No, it sounds awesome. I really like how you're like modifying your own essay lines on that, right? And the benefits of doing that. It seems like that's the 20 plus years of doing this. You figured it out.
Yeah, it helps out because you don't have a lot of drag on the line. And basically, you're not making cast over 30 feet most of the time. So to have all that extra fly line, it's kind of a waste. So I would rather have, my 60-pound high vis monofilament behind that.
Yeah.
And then get as much backing on there as I possibly can. Because these fish will run you, they'll run you 350 yards out. I mean, there's no question. And, I'm chasing them down the boat. You don't want a fish to get that far out because then you're probably going to lose them. So once they hook a big one, boom, motor starting, and they're running. And they're going, Mako shark can travel 30 to 60 miles an hour in the water. So they're moving that fast.
They're moving.
They're hauling ass.
Yeah.
And so with my day boat, I can get right up on them. And you got to stay on them. I had one tell me 7 miles last year. A giant Mako. I think it was 600 pounds. Oh. And we got into the boat in 3 hours and 45 minutes after a 7-mile tow, basically out towards the west. It was crazy. And we got it right to the boat at sunset. It was nuts. But we got it. And that was because of that system I'm talking about.
Crazy. You know what? You definitely know what you're doing, Conrad. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And I think it's very safe to say that. So it's also safe to say that, for those listeners, you're an SA ambassador, and you've been an SA ambassador for how long?
I've been working with SA for a number of years, but officially became an ambassador 2 years ago. Yeah, I've always used SA products. I mean, they were just dynamite. So when we made the connection and when we made this happen, I was really, really happy. SA is so far ahead of line technology development. You can pick up the phone, you can talk to Brad Beavis, boom, on the phone about product. Really want to engage with their ambassadors on how they can make their products better, and they just make so many varied lines that you can pretty much they cover everything in fly fishing. So for what I do, not only makos but tarpon, bonefish, permit, GTs, all that stuff is right there under the SA umbrella.
And it's all there, and it's quality, I think, just to follow that.
It's awesome. Yeah. So I was up fishing on a spring creek in California. It was called Hot Creek. It's on the Eastern Sierra, and it's a very technical river or creek, I should say. Classic spring creek, really slow moving. And I had some of the new amplitude fluorocarbon, and it was awesome. I mean, it was good stuff. I mean, and so I was. It's sort of funny. I've never been sort of particular on that kind of stuff. I never really paid much attention. But when you become an ambassador, you really start looking at things, right? You start, analyze, okay, why is this a really great, leader material? Or why is this a really great fly line? And you start breaking down the elements. On that trip, I really realized that not only that tippet material was great, but the fly lines really, they make you a better angler. So, it's great. So it's an honor being an ambassador.
No, it should be, and they add, feet to your cast for sure. You know what they're doing over there. So I also want to touch base. What's it like a quick tip that you would offer someone that wanted just to get into the Mako fishery, like as a beginner? What's something that where they would start out, or where you think they should start out?
Just be ready, be prepared to know how to fight or set a hook and fight a big fish on a fly rod. That's the first thing. Casting is not a big deal. It really is not a big deal, but it's where you put that big fly, right? So casting a big fly at close distance can be difficult. So get that down. Understand, I need to place that fly within, 5 feet of a fish's head. So go out on the line and just kind of work on that. And then really work on hook setting. Okay, making sure that you can really jam that hook into a fish's mouth. Because if you don't, you're not going to hook them. They have all these teeth and stuff. You got to get them right in the corner. And then after that, really just work through fighting fish, because that's what it's all about. I mean, once you hook these fish to get to the jump, it's all about it's mano-a-mano. You're battling that fish. And when that fish rests, that fish is regaining energy. So as an angler, you have to be physically fit enough to really hammer that fish down and not give up. But the other thing is just learn about sharks. Yeah. Learn about what turns them on. Learn about their environment. If you're targeting a Mako shark, okay, what's the best time of year? What kind of tides do they like to feed on?
What is the best time? Quickly, we have the time. What is the best time of year, and what is the tide? I think that's valuable information.
So out here, my season starts in May. Really gets kicked up in gear June, July, August. And then we have kind of a lull in September, and then they come back in October and November. So we have a migration that comes up from the south. And the moon phase is critical. New moon, full moon, great times because you have bigger tides, and just really looking at those elements. And then obviously, I mean, food items. Mako sharks have a certain food item they like to eat wherever you are. So let's say you're on the East Coast, probably eating bluefish. Out here on the West Coast, they're eating a variety of things. They're eating tuna, they're eating bonitos, they're eating barracuda, but they're also eating the bigger ones, seal. So all those food items have to be kind of present too, depending on what you're targeting. So for instance, if I'm going for really, really giant Mako sharks on a fly rod, the food item I'm looking for is a large food item for them. So I'm going to go to an area that is holding bluefin tuna, yellowfin tuna, also, dolphin, small porpoise, not dolphin fish, but porpoise. Like the Pacific white-side porpoise is a really good food item for large Makos. Finding those areas, summing those areas up, and being out there at the right time and the right moonfish. And, it's all a process of learning. I learn every day I go out. I mean, I see something new every day because I'm open to that. I never get kind of put into a corner because once you do that in fishing, you're pretty much screwed, right?
Yeah, you're done.
Because the next day everything's going to take a left turn on you.
Yeah.
So be open-minded. But there are components that you plug in and that will ensure more of a success for you. So, it's still uncharted waters, to be honest with you. I mean, blue water fly fishing had a really big it really got popular in the mid-90s, and it kind of died off a little bit. But now we're seeing a resurgence with new anglers that are really, excited about targeting big fish on a fly. I see my clientele, they're getting younger every year, which is great. It's awesome. But learn to fish, learn the fishery, learn what they eat, learn where they are, what they do, and get out there and do it. And you will be successful at some point.
Great advice. Definitely great advice. Great starting point for someone to figure it out, the fishery, and it's words to live by.
Yeah, or just come on out and fish with me for a couple days. Well, I'll die in.
That's what I was just going to ask you. If someone wanted to, if someone's like, hey, I just want to fast track all this and, go catch 600 pounders or 60 to 600, we'll leave it at that. Where would they find you?
So what you do a couple ways. Number one, ConwayBowman.com. That's easy. You can also go to Conway Bowman's Fly Fishing the World. That's my Facebook handle. And then Conway Bowman on Instagram. Everything's kind of linked in there. You'll see pictures of big Makos, you'll see tackle, you'll see tips on how to rig, all sorts of stuff. You can also go on the internet and YouTube. Just Google Conway Bowman and all kinds of stuff will pop up in terms of, YouTube channels for rigging and all that. So, and my thing is I want people to experience great fishery. I want them to catch a big fish on a fly and go, holy moly, there's nothing like that in the world. And I'll tell you, the greatest thing is this. Once people kind of climb that mountain, then they're ready for tarpon, which is a much more technical game, but they can make that jump, and it builds their confidence, and they understand the tackle, they understand how to fight a big fish, and then they go down to Florida, and they hook their first big tarpon, and they can link that back to the great Mako shark. I mean, it's a perfect fish to get introduced into big saltwater fly fishing. And as I said earlier, I've got a lot of anglers started here, and now they are outstanding saltwater fly fishing.
No, it sounds awesome. I am excited for myself to experience this fishery as well. So,
come on out.
Yeah, we definitely will.
I got a spine of the boat for you this summer.
All right, well, I will be there. How's that sound? For sure. All right, Conway, I definitely want to thank you on this episode of Guided. For sure, all great advice. I'm going to put everything that you talked about in the show notes for our listeners today, so all our links and everything like that.
Sweet.
So, for sure.
Awesome.
Thanks for being
great,
a guest.
Man. I appreciate it, Greg.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. Of course. All right, thanks. You've been listening to the Guided Podcast, sponsored by Scientific Anglers. If you like this podcast episode, please let us know and leave a review on your favorite podcast listening platform. And remember, subscribe to the Fly Fishing Insider podcast to get even more episodes of both Guided and the Fly Fishing Insider each week. See more at flyfishinginsiderpodcast.com.